But let's talk about QB rankings, because obviously these are very
This is
important when
spicy.
we're talking about super flex. We're talking about, first rounds and super flex startup drafts. And, what are we looking at as far as the QBs? Who should go ahead of who? I mean, obviously we've got the top guys, which are Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurts. To me, I would throw Joe Burrow at even though he's the fourth guy there. For me, at least, he's solidified as a top 4. And some people maybe can have the argument there with maybe CJ Stroud or Lamar or Herbert or someone else. But for me, it's Joe Burrow at that 4 slot. And if I'm in a startup draft, if I can get any one of those top 4 guys, I'm getting them. I'll throw CJ Stroud probably in there too. And even Justin Herbert probably at 6. Lamar, I'd probably throw at 7. And then for me, I'd go wide receiver at that point. But what do you think about these top, I guess, 7-ish kind of guys? What do you think about me talking about Joe Burrow as being that 4th guy? Is that solidified for you? How do you feel about the quarterback situation that's going on here?
Patrick Mahomes, I understand he's still number 1. I think Josh Allen's number 1 at this point from a fantasy perspective.
I think you can. I think you can argue any of those guys for sure. It's top 3.
Joe Burrow being behind Lamar Jackson, I understand that from a value perspective and a fantasy perspective, just because Lamar does give you the insane rushing upside. I'm not taking CJ Stroud over Joe Burrow. I can't do that. I can't bring myself to do that. So Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. So does Joe Burrow slide down to 5? That's the question. Is he going to lose T. Higgins? Right? We know Tyler Boyd probably not going to be there next year. So there's a little bit of uncertainty with that Bengals core heading down into the future over the next couple of years. So but the top 7 is pretty locked in. Justin Herbert does concern me a little bit. There's some upheaval, right, with the coach and the GM. Obviously we think he's a phenomenal talent, but is he going to have the right coach? And is the GM going to put the pieces together, right? Quentin Johnston doesn't look like a good pick right now. Keenan Allen's getting old as we speak. Mike Williams, that's an injury waiting to happen. Austin Eckler. So what are the parts going to be around Justin Herbert that you can rely on? Josh Palmer. You feel good about Josh Palmer being your best guy kind of moving forward confidently? There's some question marks around Justin Herbert and everything that's happening around him. But outside of that, I feel pretty comfortable. I think I have Joe Burrow at 5. I think CJ Stroud just slides out of there. And I think I would move CJ Stroud down 2 spots, move Lamar and Joe Burrow up a spot each. I think I have CJ Stroud ahead of Justin Herbert.
Me too. I think those are pretty much the top 7-ish kind of guys. But now, especially what we saw this year, right? Herbert go down, Joe Burrow go down. I mean, even Stroud went down now, Anthony Richardson, right? Can we make the argument to take a JJ or a Chase even as high as like the 104, 105, especially if you're in like 4-point per passing touchdown? Obviously, your league format kind of makes a difference here, but could we make the argument after the top 3 of Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts, or which way you want to put it, that you can throw JJ all the way up there as the 104? Like, would you be comfortable taking JJ or Chase at the 104, or would you have to lock in one of those top guys?
In a super flex league, I'm not doing that just because that's going to leave me really, really short. And especially if I'm at the 104, I'm not picking again to the back end of the 2nd round. And that's going to leave me with Kyler Murray, potentially, maybe something even less than that.
Dak, maybe.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. I'm not taking Joe Burrow. I mean, I'm not taking Justin Jefferson over Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson in a super flex if I'm at the 104. I'm not doing it.
That's close. I mean, what we've seen this year with the quarterbacks, it's like, damn, do we just take the wide receiver and then try and take advantage of some of the values? Like last year, we saw like Tua as a great value, right? I mean, next year, you're going to see Trevor Lawrence probably drop. You're going to see probably Tua drop. You're going to see Dak drop again, right? You're going to still see Kyler Murray fall, Justin Fields, Jordan Love, Jared Goff. I mean, obviously, then you start getting into kind of no man's land. But yeah, I mean, I think you kind of, if you can know your league a little bit, like what's going to happen, or some of the QBs going to drop.
JJ was hurt for an extended period of time, and Jamar Chase is hurt right now.
Chase too. That's true. If it's not the top, let's just say Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, maybe not even Burrow. I just feel like after that, if I'm taking a T-Law, Tua, A-Rich, even, I don't know, Purdy, who knows how high he goes. Then I'm going against guys like Patrick Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts. And then I have like not even a top wide receiver to go against other teams. At what point is it to pivot off of that top end or top tier QBs to say, you know what, let me now be able to compete with the top wide receiver to collide with going against their top quarterback? Because what's the difference between, I guess, Herbert or waiting and winding up getting a Tua or a Purdy or a Dak?
Yeah, I think the cutoff line is probably at that 106-ish if you're in a 12-man league, right? Because you're going to get the swing around, and you could get, like you said, you could get Tua. So I think the 106, 107, somewhere around that range is the cutoff for me in super flex dynasty leagues, just because you need that QB1. Like, it's just that simple for me. You really do need that QB1, and it's hard to justify skipping over that when there's a tremendous depth at wide receiver, like tremendous depth at wide receiver, in my estimation, as compared to the top end quarterbacks. And I think you can always feel like you can make up the difference in wide receivers, but it's hard to make up the difference in a top 4 or 5 quarterback.
I guess, like, if you're looking at, Burrow or Herbert or Lamar in that range, like, is it worth it to just grab JJ and then on the comeback around you have a Purdy, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray? Like, is it that much of a difference? You know what I mean? Like, just looking at it from like the points that they're putting up, is it that much of a difference to drop down from there, but be able to have a JJ or Chase compared to a Waddle, or who else is going in the back end there, Olave type? You know
I
what I
think in
mean?
that scenario, it's a little bit different. Like, if I'm at the 107, 5 or 6 quarterbacks have come off, and Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase is sitting there at the 107, I'll take that, and if I end up
Sure.
with Tua, okay, I can live with that.
I'm saying, though, what about a little bit earlier? Instead of taking Joe Burrow at the 105 or the 104, do you take a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase and then come back in the second round and be able to get that? I don't know. I don't know who's going to be there, but Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray. You know what I mean? So then you'll have let's just say you wind up with JJ and Dak, or Kyler Murray, JJ and Kyler Murray, instead of like Burrow and Chris Olave.
Kind of splitting hairs at that point, in my estimation. But I
It
think
is.
I have to take the franchise quarterback, man. It's a legitimate scenario. But there has to be a line, and if you're doing your startup drafts, you have to have that line of cutoff where, like, all right, cool. If I get to this, if I'm in this spot and this player's available, this is the move I'm gonna make. Right. If I'm at the 104, am I taking Joe Burrow or Justin Jefferson?
So we've got Fields, we've got Love, we've got Jared Goff down here, 14, 15, 16. Bryce down here, Howell, who was benched last game apparently, but is still the starter here at QB 17. Deshaun Watson all the way down here at QB 20. And then, of course, you got like the Russells, the Kirks, the Baker Mayfields, and all that down here.
You mean Baker Montana?
Will
Jesus.
Levis at QB 19 here.
Yeah, I think these guys are plenty fine as the super flex quarterbacks, but there's a lot of movement here potentially, right? In a guy like Justin Fields, in a guy like Jordan Love. I don't think Jared Goff is going anywhere. I think that's probably the best value here. And I've been talking up Jared Goff for quite some time as tremendous value. If he's your super flex quarterback on a week in, week out basis, you feel really, really good about that. Jared Goff could be a little Jekyll and Hyde, but if he's your QB2, that's probably about as good as it gets as a QB2. Sam Howell, right? Sam Howell was QB, top 5? And he gets benched?
There's a lot of things there's a lot that goes into it. So, I mean, we can't feel safe with Sam Howell anymore, because we had the big episode on Sam Howell, and we talked about how, all right, you know what, he could be somewhat safe, but it wound up that they kept on losing. That was the one thing that we said, is if they keep losing, then you could be worried. If they've got a top 5 pick, I mean, they should be worried. You got a new regime that's going to be coming in. They don't have ties to Howell or even B-Rob for that matter, right? Any of these guys.
Yep.
I think that's the rough part about it. We can't feel safe with Howell anymore. I think his value is going down as we're getting closer now to the offseason. So Will Levis is going to wind up jumping. But yeah, Jared Goff, we talked about last year as a great value in drafts. Now he's going to wind up moving up. He's going to get the contract and he's going to wind up moving up. He'll probably be
Low end QB1
right
range,
here
high
between
end
like, yeah,
QB2.
right behind like the Kyler and Dak. He'll jump ahead of Love, and Fields I don't know if he'll jump ahead of Fields. How much, that's the thing. How much more up can we move him? We can't move him past Kyler Murray, right? Or Purdy or Tua, right? To be fair, like he could probably only move up 2 spots, but I think Fields, with the upside of Fields, like Fields might have to be ahead, and they could draft somebody, but Fields is probably going somewhere then. There's rumblings that they could draft Caleb. So do they wind up shipping Fields off? We keep hearing Atlanta.
That'd be interesting to see.
I mean, do we move him above Love? But other than that, I mean, realistically, how much more really can we move him up?
It is tough because all those guys are, and most of those guys have rushing upside, right? Not really Jordan Love. He has some wheels, but Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Dak, not so much. Brock Purdy, not really. Yeah, I'm comfortable with Jared Goff being somewhere in that, like you said, that 13 range, 14 range.
So,
where is he now?
Yeah, he's at 16. So yeah, let me ask you this. Going back to the question
16?
before, what if I wait on that top QB, right? And not go with, after that 103, what if I do take JJ there, and then on that comeback, like I'm able to get a Dak and a Jared Goff, or a Dak and a Jordan Love, a Dak and a Bryce Young? Or would you still rather just have
starting
the
to put
top?
it's tough. I mean, I'm torn, really, right? You kind of, it's one of those things where you go into the draft and you're feeling it out. I'd probably still go with the quarterback, but there is a scenario that I could see if I end up with Dak Prescott and Jordan Love, or Dak Prescott and Jared Goff. Like, I feel pretty solid about that. And if you tell me I'm going to have JJ, then that's extremely intriguing. There's an argument to be made. I don't know if I would pull that trigger, but I could see a scenario where if you told me at the end of the third round I had Justin Jefferson, Dak Prescott, and Jared Goff, I wouldn't feel terrible about it.
Well, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Ricardo's kind of understanding what I'm saying. Watson is definitely a great value all the way down here at QB 20. So he's for sure one of the great values. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say here, is that after that tier of like Mahomes, Allen, Hurts almost, and maybe you make another mini tier of like a Burrow, Stroud if you want, Lamar, Herbert. But like, you could argue that even those guys and everybody after that is kind of like one big tier, which is kind of the point I'm trying to make, is at what point do maybe you say, fuck it, let me take the wide receiver and I'll take 2 of these guys in this huge big tier. Can you do
You
that in
trying to
your
convince
particular
me?
league?
I
I
see
don't
what you're
know.
doing.
No, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to say like where I'm coming from, just a different thought process, instead of what we're used to doing and saying, oh, I gotta grab one of those top QBs, even in the middle. You know what I'm saying? What if we look at it a different kind of way and say, okay, what if I just take the top wide receiver and then take some of these back end guys here in the QBs 10ish to 15ish range that are kind of the same as like QB 6? Like they're 6 to 15 is like a huge, almost you can say a huge tier basically.
Yeah, I'm totally not disputing that, and I'm not saying I'm not open to it. I guess it really depends on how I feel that day. Seeing how the draft shakes out, right? You have to feel it, man.
No, yeah,
Seriously,
listen, I'm
you
just
have you
throwing
have
out
to feel it.
maybe a different way of thinking about it, instead of us always trying to grab one of the top QBs, because we saw this year, like especially what happened, with Burrow, with Herbert, with most of these guys. I mean, it is kind of a big drop off after like those topish kind of guys. Any which way
I
you
would
want to
make
put
that
it, I
argument.
just feel like there is one kind of huge tier after like the topish few guys, whichever way you want to put it, that kind of can make you think a little bit differently, maybe going into Dynasty this year, because a lot of things are changing, right? So we've got to change with the times. And if these guys are all kind of finishing in this kind of same-ish kind of tier, then maybe we rethink somewhat of our startup strategies. What's some different ways that maybe we can approach it to try and gain an advantage.
Will say this, I definitely agree, especially with the tier drop off after those first four-ish, 5 guys, depending, where they're relatively similar. So it does make sense. Like, I'm not disputing it. It's not the way I would probably approach it, but
Yeah.
12 to 15-ish guys, if you end up with 2 of those instead of a top 5 guy and then a 18, to 20 guy. That's how you're looking at it. But you add on top of it, you have a wide receiver 1 clear.
Like, does Purdy sneak into like the first round?
Are you taking Purdy or Tua?
Legit question nowadays. I feel like I want Tua, but
Are you taking Purdy or T-Law? The legitimate questions, and we were talking about this before.
I don't know. I'm probably still taking T-Law, but at this point, like, I'm not even 100% sure why. I think that could be a legit
Crazy
question
how
now.
I do like the quarterback rankings because, like you said, after that initial tier, there's so many arguments to be made on which route to go.
If you can get some stud wide receivers, I mean, and have Russ as you take Russ as your QB too. Like, can you wait and take a Russell? Kirk Cousins is going to be down here. Baker Mayfield, who knows if he gets the starting job? Stafford. I mean, you've even got Daniel Jones all the way down here. I mean, Aaron Rodgers. So, there's some opportunities to kind of wait on some quarterbacks.
Also, too, the quarterback coming in, right? Where's Caleb going to slot here? Where's Drake May? Where's Penix going to slot in?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second. So, Caleb, Drake May are probably going to be the same kind of as we saw last year with with Richardson and Stroud and Bryce is probably like back end first round picks. I can see Caleb going as high as like the 106, like after Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, Lamar almost. I could see an argument with Herbert, or I could see him go right after Herbert. Like, I could see him go that particularly high, but back end first, at least those two QBs are going to go. And if there's a third QB, which looks like Jaden Daniels is possibly going to be that third QB that gets selected really high in the draft, he's going to be early second round pick, maybe mid second round pick. So they're all going to go in the top 15. Let me put it that way. They're going to go in the top 15 picks of Dynasty Superflex drafts if all three of these quarterbacks get selected in like the top 5, top 10.
And that makes some of those guys after them even better values.
Exactly.
To go to your point, where if you want to get the JJ and then just wait and grab, like you said, and you end up with Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott, and you have Justin Jefferson, that just furthers your point that you were making earlier.
You feel me? Exactly. So, there might be some different ways that we can attack some of these drafts this year.